Minister for Trade and Industry and Compensation, Parks Dow, has confirmed in a parliamentary question that the National Lotteries Commission will compensate whistleblowers who helped expose R2 billion corruption at the organization. The NLC says that they met with whistleblowers whose lives were turned upside down after exposing corruption. The Democratic Alliance has welcomed the move by the NLC and has called for this to be extended to other government departments as well. To tell us whether this would be a step in the right direction, we are now joined by anti-corruption campaigner John Clarke. John, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. First of all, let's start off with the decision by the NLC to compensate these whistleblowers. What do you make of it?
Well, morning, Eldrin. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, very exciting. Nice way to start the new year, to know that we finally, after so much sacrifice, so much struggle, so much harassment and intimidation and retaliation, that we're beginning to turn the tide. I'm very excited about it. It's implicit in the Constitution is restorative justice. So what this is basically putting into practice constitutional values. So that's my first opening point, is that this ought to be the norm in our society.
It ought to be the norm in our society. So what does compensating of whistleblowers do to the fight against corruption?
Well, firstly, it incentivizes, or at least encourages, shall we not use that word, those who are sitting in employment situations, they've come across wrongdoing, they're very uncomfortable about what's happening, they know that there's going to be risks associated with them blowing the whistle, and what we've now have seen, unfortunately under this sort of era of state capture, is merciless retaliation against such people because the instruments of the criminal justice system have themselves been captured. So we've had a situation where the very people that are meant to support and encourage people to blow the whistle on wrongdoing are actually now persecuting them for it. So we begin to switch that switch off and switch on another one and get us back onto normal. And one has to pay tribute to Thuli Madonsela for what she did as a public protector all those years ago now with her state of capture report, because she basically understood that the Constitution was intentionally restorative, which doesn't mean soft on wrongdoing. It means that how can we get a more deeper insight into what really is going on, the truth, in such a way that the people that are, in a sense, caught up in the whole kind of web of corruption and intrigue are able to be the ones that are actually bringing it to the fore. And that's what's now happening, and we can hopefully see a lot more people coming forward.
Yeah, but I wonder, though, whether it does deal with like, for instance, with the people that are involved now. With this example, with the National Lotteries Commission, these are people that blew the whistle during a certain tenure. They were hollowed out. Some of them even faced a constructive dismissal. But this compensation would come after the effect, after they've already suffered all of the loss and all of the mental implications that a dismissal of this nature would have on an individual who has their own financial responsibilities towards their families.
Well, yes, I think what I'm hearing you say, in a sense, is what social workers are really trained to do, is look at ways of preventing it. Because, the devastation, the effect of this, even the money that's going to be paid, hopefully, and I'm not at liberty to go into any of the details because it's all a non-disclosure agreement is signed between the NLC and the particular whistleblower or journalist or others who have been instrumental in bringing it to the fore. But I can talk in sort of more general terms, in terms of saying, if we are going to ensure that this becomes something constructive in the long term, we've got to, in the first place, have a Chapter 9 institution that does what Thuli Madonsela did when she was public protector, that ensures a restorative justice process that brings all stakeholders into the process of deciding and firstly determining what the actual extent of the corruption, the wrongdoing is, and secondly, then deciding what needs to be done in a way that all stakeholders are given the opportunity to be, in a sense, heal through the process, including the perpetrators. And in this sense, I understand that the money that they're going to be using for the compensation is going to be money that they've recovered through the asset forfeiture unit, et cetera, et cetera. I want to also see people who are perpetrators are still running scared to actually realize that that trying to outrun, the hound of heaven, to put it that way, is not going to work for you. And I would want to put an invitation to people who are deeply implicit in corruption. Why don't you come and talk to me too now? Because the tide's changing. You don't want to be on the wrong side of history. I'm a social worker. I've got a professional accountability to be absolutely confidential. And hopefully, this can be the beginning of a process whereby people more deeply mired in corruption, not the whistleblowers that we now know, because these are all virtuous people who have done the right thing from the word go. Yeah. I'm talking about people who are more deeply embedded, who are now realizing, whoopsie, maybe I ought to have made another choice. Well, I do believe that, that saying of St. Augustine, every a saint has a past, every sinner has a future. Let's find a way where this restorative process can really come forward. It does require the legislature and the executive to come to the party to overhaul the Protected Disclosures Act, to ensure that there is a total safe place for people who have got to perceive wrongdoing to come and do something about it, even if they feel a little bit implicated. We've got to have a process that's prior to the criminal justice process, which is very tedious, very long term, which is what the villains have done. They've used and abused the law as a way of trying to deter and delay justice. I think we need a prior process that's still rigorous, that still looks to where the truth lies, but is more, as I say, an inquisitorial process rather than an adversarial process that enables people who are, in a sense, feeling like they're on the verge, they're kind of looking at their options, to let them know. And what the legislature needs to do is to stop blocking people that use lawfare to actually retaliate against people. And the best example I can give of that, is a good example, is Karen Moore, how she has been able to sustain and stay resilient in the face of the retaliation she got from Jacob Zuma and Dali Mpofu, with the whole, what I call a SLAM suit, strategic litigation against media. It's a variation of the SLAP suit, which I've had experience of myself, strategic litigation against public participation. And there's another one now, strategic litigation on whistleblowers, a SLOW suit. So we've got to have legislation that outlaws the abuse of legal process and does it very quickly, soon, if we're going to get a handle on corruption in this country. Very soon, please. And thank you to the DA for what they've done. I was also in touch recently with Frank Chikane, and I was urging him to try and get a message at the ANC's conference to put out a message to say the ANC is going to be leading the process in the GNU to make sure that whistleblowers, journalists, activists and academics who have got information are not going to suffer the retaliation, because what we are doing in retaliation against them, we are pushing South Africa into a failed state.
Yeah. So if we have a policy of that nature that is introduced, how then do we ensure that the money is not being misused or abused, like we've seen with crime intelligence and the slush fund? And then on the other end as well, now, for instance, the police intelligence is saying that, listen, we just don't have enough money to pay informers.
Yeah, well, of course, I mean, obviously, I mean, I would say hire a whole lot of social workers, because you know that social workers don't do their job for the money. You need to have people who are non-judgmental about them, and to obviously have the balance between recognizing the material incentives and the psychological, emotional, and spiritual incentive. I do believe that one thing we need to do, it requires wisdom. We need to pray our way through this. We need to find that sort of discernible wisdom of Solomon to say, how do I institute that justice here to make sure it doesn't backfire on me? Well, I know that politicians are obviously have to be risk averse because they don't want to upset the electorate, and the electorates are fickle, and the news cycles are fickle. We've got to have a deeper consultation between all sectors of society, both the legislature, the politicians, the civil society, the media, and academia, all those who have a contribution to make South African society more civil. Yeah, and then I think we're going to see the new dawn.
Yeah, and the reason that I asked this question, John, is you just spoke about, for instance, the NDA that was signed. Aren't these public funds? Why go into an NDA? Because we know that once there is the secrecy around stuff, that's when the abuse comes in, like we've seen with crime intelligence.
No, look, I see that. I mean, they're public funds, but they're also private lives. Our Constitution also protects privacy and all the rest. And the last thing you want to see happen is the people that are now suddenly, the amounts of money that are disclosed about how much compensation they get, and suddenly, the whistleblowers become the most popular people in the village, because everybody wants to be their friends because they know they've got a big payout. You have to avoid that. I mean, that would be absolutely unhelpful because, the lottery people know, don't they? I mean, when people that win a large sum of money, very few of them actually ultimately show a better quality of life for having got those billions or millions. It's fun. And what they need is support and encouragement and guidance so that they can deal with this totally changed situation, because it's a huge crisis. And I've dealt with clients who have been gambling addicts who have found themselves stealing money, gambling it, and then finding themselves in trouble with the law. And it's a terribly painful thing. There needs to be a process where we prevent that as well, but that's another whole discussion.
Okay.
The point I'm making is that we've got to be very conscious of the nature of human nature. We've got to also say, we're speaking truth to power. We've got to understand the nature of power as well, and how power needs to be handled with a huge amount of sense of stewardship and accountability. And we've got it in our Constitution for all those checks and balances.
Okay,
so what
John?
we're seeing in the police, I mean, I believe that we're getting on top of that one now too. We're seeing what's happened with the Minister of Police is doing a great job now in cleaning up crime intelligence, and the political killings task force being disbanded and all that stuff. That's also been a very positive story.
Thank you so much, John. John Clarke, anti-corruption campaigner there, on that call that has been made by the Democratic Alliance to extend this decision that has been taken by the NLC to compensate whistleblowers.